My name is Britt. My clients call me Coach Britt or just Britt. We keep it casual over here. I am an ADHD coach for adults living with ADHD. I tend to work with people who are late diagnosed, so finding out well into their adulthood that this is the diagnosis they have. I tend to work with creatives, members of the LGBTQ community, and a lot of people who find themselves asking, where is the secret manual to adulting that was somehow hidden from me and I never got?
And a retreat coming up too.
Well, I have a retreat with my business partner, Larissa Hiller. She is a really cool accountant who specializes in working with women solopreneurs who have ADHD. That is her bread and butter. September 15th through 18th in the Catskills for solopreneur women with ADHD who are really struggling to manage everything that one needs to manage in a business because they find they're trying all of these standard practices, but finding that those practices are falling short for their specific needs.
Tell me a little bit about your story.
Long story short, I wanted to be an actor. That's all I ever wanted to do. My parents said, "That is so nice, sweetie. Please get a degree." So I went to school. I got a degree in psychology because I thought if I'm going to act, I need to understand how people work, and what better way to understand how people work than to study the human brain. I ended up really falling in love with my major. Turns out I really enjoy science far more than I anticipated I ever would. I got that degree. I felt a little lost. One of my acting peers was a coach. I think I said something along the lines of, your job doesn't sound real. I don't understand what you do. Coaching, if we're talking about life coaching, is still a relatively new industry. So she explained it to me, and I thought, oh, that sounds cool. In my impulsive ways, I immediately signed up for a coach training course. I signed up for the most rigorous course I could find. I completed a year-long intensive training course for coaches in Washington, D.C. And I was going to be an ontological coach. Ontological is like study of being. So lots of mindset, lots of how are we choosing to show up in a situation. It was heavily influenced by positive psychology, and it was really fun and it was really cool. And I was learning tools that were really helpful, not only to my clients, but to me. And I was seeing a personal change. And at the same time, there were a lot of things that just didn't work for me and didn't make sense for me. My favorite example of this is I was in class with my coaching cohort, and one of our instructors said something along the lines to one of my classmates, "You keep falling asleep today. If you can't pay attention, I really think you need to consider that there's something in this conversation that is maybe too heavy or too triggering for you, and you just can't be with it." And I was like, maybe I'm just distracted by the fact that the air conditioning kicked on, and I'm going to be thinking about that until I hear the siren out the window, and then you'll put something on a sticky note that'll be a different color, and then I'll come back to whatever you were saying. Sometimes it's just executive dysfunction. I started tweaking all of my stuff to make sense for me and for my clients, and it just grew from there. I have since gone on to get a lot more training in terms of ADHD coaching specifically, and been working in the industry since.
It's hilarious hearing you talk because I feel like it's my exact story.
We're on the same wavelength here.
We're on the same wavelength. My husband, in his vows, he was going to do my math and remember my dates for me because I won't remember them. I know.
That's
so good. He did not marry me for that. I did the same thing. I decided to be a coach and did a year-long program. It was 16 hours a week for a year. There's obviously layers to starting a health and a fitness journey, but part of it is just managing time, right? Managing expectations, and managing tasks. One of the big things that I see, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that a lot of people assume that they have more time than they do, or they assume that something's not going to take as long as it's going to take. So how do you work with people on that, on kind of setting up their schedule and setting expectations?
So there is a specific term for this when it comes to ADHD. I think this is something all humans do to a certain extent, especially when we talk about the planning fallacy and how our intentions tend to overshadow relevant baseline information and past experience. When we are really excited about something and we're starting a new journey and we're hopeful, we tend to forget that life is also going to happen alongside this beautiful, wonderful journey. When it comes to ADHD, we have an added layer of something we call time blindness. It's an inability to feel time passing in the same way that people without time blindness feel time passing. I've heard it described like this, and then I'll share how I like to talk about it. I've heard it described as, for people without time blindness, time is linear. We're just chugging along. This was yesterday. This is today. This is tomorrow. And you can really feel accurately how far away these things are from each other.
Sequential.
Yeah. With ADHD, time is now and not now. This is happening right now, or it's happening not now. That's a million light years away. It could be 40 minutes from now. It could be 6 months from now. For me, I like to describe this, and I'm talking to people who are like, what do you mean? I say pretend we're both standing on train tracks and a train is coming from really far away. You can see the light on that train and you can feel it rumbling. And you're like, I better get off this track because the train's coming. All of us, the train's not touching me. I don't feel or see the train until it is steaming on my neck. The light is blinding me in the eyes and the tracks are shaking, and then I need to jump off. That's how that now works. Just because we can't feel time, it doesn't mean we can't access time in other ways. So when it comes to time management with ADHD, I like to say, how can we hear time? How can we see time if we can't feel time? When it comes to more immediate things, such as, yeah, I totally have time to fit in a workout before I go to work in the morning. A lot of times people overestimate when they have. I'll say, get a clock where you can see the seconds counting down. We need to see the time pass. Another trick is if you wake up in the morning and you have somewhere to be and there's a lot of stuff you want to do between now and then, you can pull up your Maps app, whether that's Google Maps, Waze, I don't care. Put in where you need to go. It will consistently update to, if you leave right now, here is when you are going to get there. It does all of that for you, so you don't have to try to go, I could probably squeeze all this in. No, if I leave right now, here is when I will get to my destination. When we're talking about longer term planning, for dear, a nice healthy rule of thumb is if you have attempted something like this before, whatever your estimate for how long it's going to take, just multiply that by 1.5. Because 9 times out of 10, we're not considering those other life things that we're going to get in the way. If this goes smoothly, if I never get caught in traffic, whatever, go ahead and multiply by 1.5 so you give space for life to happen. You might get the stomach flu for a week. Probably not going to want to hit the gym that week. Probably isn't good for you. It's good for anybody at the gym. If you have never done it before, go ahead and multiply your estimate by 3. Because you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And usually people have other priorities too. This isn't their only priority in their life. And so when women usually come to you, I assume that their goal is what? Balancing their life with their business or managing their business primarily? What are they looking for?
It's interesting. What people really come to me for is less about feeling in charge and on top of business and more about how do I fit the life things in. When we talk about business owners, people normally go into business are very passionate about it.
Mm.
They may not have as difficult a time doing those tasks, but they do the other tasks around the business, like fitness, household chores, remembering to get your oil changed in your car before you end up spending thousands of dollars on repairs. It's fitting those other things in and keeping those priorities in check.
What is something you hear all the time, but people think they're the only ones experiencing?
If I'm not hard on myself, my whole life will fall apart. What normally precedes that statement and thinking like everybody else can just do it. Like I have to be so hard on myself to be kind of mean. After every little perceived failure or life just happening, they have this ongoing narrative of how they're bad, they're lazy, they're not doing as well as their sister, their friend, somebody they went to high school with, whatever. But this idea that I have to be unreasonably hard on myself to get anything done, and that's just how it is for me. Other people like may not have it like that, but for me, like I have to be mean to me.
I've heard that from clients too. And I know I personally have felt like that. I don't think I feel like that now, but it was always about control for me. It was like, if I'm not controlling everything, then nothing will be in control.
Yes.
So how do you, I know for us, when I work with people, a lot of times it's continuing to come back to the big picture and that this is not going to be linear. One meal is not going to mess everything up or save everything. And neither is going to work out. Not even a week is going to do that. How do you work with clients on changing that perspective?
From an ADHD standpoint, reminding people that shame is actually a really terrible motivator. It's not fun to run towards a goal, whether that goal be I want to deadlift 200 pounds or I want to write a book, I want to make X amount of money, whatever that goal is. It's not fun to run towards that goal if you are just running away from things you think are wrong. That's incredibly demotivating because every time you are working on it, you are reinforcing this idea that there's something inherently wrong with you. So one, what do you actually value? Because that will help inform where we're going and doesn't have to do with what you may believe to be your personal moral thing, right? What are you actually excited about? As opposed to what are we running away from? But also with ADHD, hey, a lot of that is some built-in ableism and maybe a lack of understanding of how ADHD works. When you have a better understanding of how your brain is working and how it may be different physically, when you know what's going on, then you know, hey, this isn't a personal failing. This is just a feature. Sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes it gets in the way, but it's a feature. How do I accommodate this feature? We don't look at people who wear glasses and say, did you try harder before you put those on? Are you sure you don't just have like lazy eyes?
Mm-hmm.
But like you can see without them. So it's not like you really need them. Like we don't do that with other things, but with invisible conditions, we tend to do that.
Yeah.
Realize that most of us have our own glasses or accommodations. It's okay to use them.
It's like judging a fish for not being able to walk.
Poor fish wasn't built to do that.
I see a lot of times with people's own families, they won't ask for the support that they need. A lot of times, family members are happy to. Not always, but a lot of times people are like, yeah, sure, no problem. Can we not buy this food and keep it in the house anymore? Or can we put it in this other place? These very simple things. And usually people don't have a problem with it. Hey, can we not make dessert every weekend? Can we stop baking cookies every Saturday? If your goal is to eat less cookies, motivation is on a spectrum, right? We have extrinsic motivation, which has a lot of different steps in it. And then we have intrinsic motivation, which is, of course, the gold standard. You were talking about moving from extrinsic motivation of shame and punishment to a more value-based introjected regulation. I think about that a lot with people. I try to figure out where their motivation lies, and then how can we bump them up to the next step on the motivation ladder.
Where I'm coming from with that is the ADHD brain is interest motivated. I wish it was motivated by things like importance, deadlines, consequences. It is not. It is motivated by things that are interesting. That means the things that we're passionate about, that we actually care about, are going to be so much easier to do. It doesn't just apply to people with ADHD, but for people with ADHD, really do have to find the fun in a situation if you want to create a long-term habit, you want to chase a long-term. There's also this section of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. From a purely cognitive standpoint, internal motivation and low internal motivation is something that ADHD struggle with for many reasons. We tend to have lower amounts of dopamine and norepinephrine floating around in our brain, and finding the ways to naturally increase that motivation is really important. It's knowing what actually works for our brain versus what may work for plenty of other brains, but it's never going to work for ours, and that's okay.
I've heard this term dopaminu.
Ooh, I love a dopaminu.
Can you explain what a dopaminu is and what the purpose is?
So if we don't naturally have as much free-floating dopamine, which is really important in terms of things like satisfaction, momentum, motivation, et cetera, how do we put dopamine into our lives? A dopaminu is one tool for doing. My favorite dopamenus are created like a real menu. You'll have an appetizer, an entree, dessert, sides, specials. These are the things that help you get started. They're inherently increasing your dopamine, inherently increasing your motivation. An appetizer, let's say you're facing a task that you don't want to do. You have very low motivation around it. What's an appetizer that could like prime you to do that? These things are different for everyone. For me, it would be listening to an intro song, like a musical, because I'm a big musical theater nerd. Like 9 to 5, the musical, throw me on that. I'm hyped now. I'm ready to tackle whatever I want, or I'm more ready. The entrees are things you can do alongside that task to make it more enjoyable. For me, like having a hot cup of coffee is really enjoyable. It's something that I'm going to incorporate into a task 9 times out of 10 that feels hard. When I sit down and send like a bunch of emails, you bet your butt I have a hot cup of coffee. I might also be listening to a true crime podcast. I may also be in a certain location that makes me happy. There's a reason my office is pink. It makes me happy. I may have certain like fidget toys or other sensory experiences. I may like light a candle, for example, as a part of that main course of things I do while I'm in the task to keep my dopamine up and therefore my motivation up. Dessert. This is probably my reward, right? I've completed the task. What comes after? Maybe it's a bubble bath. Maybe it's ice cream. I personally am very food motivated. I understand this doesn't work for everyone. For me, it is powerful. Some people will buy themselves flowers when they finish the task.
Yeah.
It really just depends on who you are and what makes you happy. Then there's sessions, right? These are the things that we don't have all the time. Maybe you plan a 3-day vacation. Things like that.
That's a really good breakdown. I think a lot of people could use that. Even just to get started working out. Working out gets hard, and you could say just put on your shoes and go, but this idea of sweetening the pot, listen to music or control your environment, put on clothes you like. I have a lot of clients that they will buy cute workout clothes to make themselves work out.
Go for it. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, we do this for kids all the time, and we either forget or some of us think I shouldn't need that because I'm not a kid and I should just be an adult. I'm like,
Right.
do it. And that's fine. But also you're an adult and you don't have to do things. More than anything, I want people to know you don't have to do everything all by yourself. There is no award at the end of your life for never asking for help. I don't think anybody is going to stand up at your funeral and say, she never asked for help, not once. And that's what I like most about her. We are communal beings. Humans are meant to exist in community and rely on community. It is okay to get accountability, to get support. That sometimes looks like hiring an ADHD coach, hiring someone like you. Sometimes it can simply look like reaching out and saying, hey, I am struggling and I just need some validation. I just need to hear that I'm not alone in this. Like, it's
Right.
okay. It's more than okay. It will expand your life for better. Find the people like you. Find the people who get it and learn to be in community with